Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. In today's video, I'm going to share 3 different ways to add color to a stamped image on clear acetate sheets. Today I'll be using Trinity Stamp's very special SLIMLINE stamp set, but you can use any outline stamp set that you have. The first way to do it is to use alcohol-based markers like Copics. This is the stamp I'll be using from the Trinity Stamp's very special stamp set. It's a slimline size. I'll also be using Paper Wish's heat embossable acetate sheets. I'm using this pack today because they come in 8.5 by 11, so they're perfect to cut down to a slimline size. I'll cut one sheet in half to 8.5 by 5.5 so I can fit it in my original Misty. I'm going to use Stazon pigment ink to stamp the image. I love this ink, but I did notice that the small ink pad dries out very quickly. So if you try it out, I would purchase the refill at the same time as the ink pad because I already had to refill mine. With a large stamp like this, you do need lots of pressure, so I use a microfiber towel on the front of the Misty to get lots of even pressure throughout. Once it was stamped, I did give it a few minutes to dry, but this ink dries pretty quickly. Once I was convinced it wouldn't smear, I flipped it over. We're actually going to color on the back of the acetate because this type of ink can ruin your Copic markers and brush tips. But since the image is on a clear medium, you can see it from both sides, obviously. I started by coloring a pink bear in the corner and noticed right away that the best thing to do is simply lay color down in as few strokes as you can manage. When you go back over the colored area, the marker picks up some of the color already laid down, since the ink cannot sink into this medium. It just seems to move the color around, and then you can see the strokes of the marker. Fortunately, these are not as obvious from the front, so we'll be able to flip the image back around once done with the coloring. But from here on out, I really tried to just lay down one layer of color and fill in the bears with a rainbow of different colors. One of the purple bears ended up so dark I was afraid you wouldn't be able to see the stamping, so I used the fact that the marker picks up color to my advantage by going in with a lighter color and picking up that darker color. Don't worry about the marker tip. Just wipe off the darker color on a piece of scratch paper. This type of color swapping won't ruin your marker. I used Trinity Stamp's Scallops and Banners die set to cut out a scalloped border. And then since I didn't have a perfectly sized slimline rectangle to cut out the inside, I used a craft knife and a metal ruler to cut out the window inside the scalloped edge. I added tape runner around the scalloped edge and placed it down on the front of the colored in acetate. So the stamping is on the front and the coloring is on the back. I trimmed off the excess acetate and then placed skinny pieces of foam tape around the rectangle of the scalloped edge, and then poured confetti sequins inside. I removed the foam backings and then placed another scalloped rectangle I had die cut using the same die on top. I used the corners and bumps of the scallops to make sure I had everything lined up. Here's the sentiment portion of the stamp set. I just cut the backing and the cover so that I could store this piece and the bear stamp in a regular stamp pocket because it comes as an 11-inch piece that would stick out. So I treated the black cardstock with anti-static powder, stamped the sentiment with Versamark ink, poured white heat embossing powder on top, and then heat set and melted the embossing powder with my heat tool. I cut it down to a sentiment strip, and then I placed a piece of foam tape behind it. I should have used my black foam squares for this, but I had misplaced them in the mess that was my desk and floor at the time. I used my score pal to measure the width of the 8.5 by 11 piece of white cardstock I'm using for the card base. After having several cards not perfectly line up at score lines, I decided to go ahead and order the latest score pal that has score lines by eighths, so you'll see that in a future video. But for now, I just made the base a little thinner than the panel. To cut off the bottom of the cardstock, I placed the folded edge in the trimmer and just sliced off the bottom. Then add tape runner to the base and place the panel on top. I love how easy it was to color all these cute bears different colors and then be able to turn them into a shaker window. Not every card maker has alcohol-based markers, so I wanted to come up with a couple of different ways to add color to these stamped images on acetate sheets. So the second way is to use different colors of heat embossing powder. For this technique, you do need to stamp on the embossable acetate sheets that I showed at the beginning of this video. I did the same technique of stamping with Stazon pigment on the Paper Wishes embossable plastic, and now I'm cutting the image down so it will fit on a mini slimline card. I am again working on the back of the plastic so as not to smear the image, and I'm wiping my Versamark ink pad all over the back of the plastic. Once I'm sure I've covered the whole back with Versamark, I'm pouring different colors of Wow embossing powder on the back. The ink will stay wet for a while, so I just pour a little bit of one color, then put the excess back in the jar, and then start working with the second color. I did this process with 3 different pink colors and 1 silver color, and just poured the powder in different spots to create a multicolor background. Once it looked like everything was covered up, I heat set the embossing powder. With acetate, it's important not to hold the heat tool over any one spot too long. Even embossable acetate will melt eventually. When I flipped the image over, I realized I missed a couple of spots and I wanted some more of the darker pink. So I added some more Versamark using a blending foam this time because I did not want to put my ink pad down on the glittery background. I covered the missing spots and added more of the dark pink, and I love how the bears look all glittery and in different pink tones. Instead of a shaker, I'm going to mat this clear piece on some of my favorite things, silver glitter cardstock. I love this silver glitter paper with no shedding, and the fact that it comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets is awesome for slimline cards. I then cut a piece of my favorite things ripe raspberry cardstock to mat the silver on top of. I layered the glitter cardstock on top of the ink with tape runner, but I used Thermoweb's Ultra Bond liquid glue to adhere the bare panel because I figured the glittery background wouldn't adhere to the glitter cardstock with tape runner, and you can't see the glue through the front because of all that embossing powder. For the sentiment, I'm using Distress Oxide Picked Raspberry ink on white cardstock. I stamped it twice for a great impression, and I'm using tape runner to adhere it to the front of the card. Since this is a mini slimline card, I needed to cut off the edge because the 8.5 width is too long. I'm using the score pal again to score a line letting me know where to cut, but I am once again excited to have more score lines to work with soon. Last but not least, if you can use alcohol-based markers to color on acetate, you can definitely use alcohol inks as well. Let's check it out. This time, I'm trimming the stamped down image to fit on a horizontal A2 card. I'm working on a glass mat because I'm going to be using a variety of alcohol inks, mixative, alcohol ink blending solution, and an air blower. I'm also using a round felt blender on my blending tool. I put a few drops of pool alcohol ink on the back of the acetate with the stamped image. You really want to keep the alcohol ink and blending solution in the middle of the panel because any of these will smear the image if it seeps underneath and mixes with the stamping. Trust me, I learned that one the hard way. To avoid that, I'm using the ink blending tool to move the color around. I put a few drops of a darker blue right on the felt tool, and I'm adding that color in. I added some white mixative, a bit of silver alloy, and some blending solution to add some different coloring to the image. I'm going to turn this into a shaker, so I'm using liquid glue to adhere the alcohol inked panel down to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 piece of acetate because I want to protect the back of this from the shaker goodies. I die cut and am adhering the largest of the waffle flower picture frames die on top of that acetate. I love using this die for shakers because it has lines on the corners that make it look like an actual picture frame, and the frame itself is thick enough to easily add foam tape behind. I'm using Lucy's Little Things in matte silver sequins inside the shaker, and then I've cut a piece of blue glitter paper from the Memory Box glitter pad down to A2 size to put on the back. Since foam adhesive doesn't really adhere to glitter well, I'm placing lines of Ultra Bond in the centers of the foam tape to make sure it holds. Then I just lay the glitter down on that mix of foam tape and liquid glue. I picked a sentiment that would work on the picture frame, so I die cut one more picture frame from white cardstock, and I'm going to use Distress Oxide Blueprint Sketch so that this card is really another monochromatic look like the pink was. Since I was waiting for the sentiment to dry, I placed tape runner all around the card and laid the top frame on top. I love the almost tie-dyed effect of the alcohol ink coloring on this cute image and the little sequins peeking out against the darker blue glittery background. I hope you enjoyed these techniques. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified every time I have a new video available. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.